We had Lou Glazier from Michigan Futures in our office the other day talking about the importance of college education to the prosperity of the state. And you know, some of the statistics he laid out were pretty pretty intriguing. I mean, half of the jobs in Michigan today, 56%, according to his report, are considered low-paying jobs. And of the rest of the jobs, the good-paying jobs, 80% of them are occupied by people with college degrees. And so I guess looking at Michigan, looking at the college environment here and career environment, is the issue that Michigan has too few jobs for talented, high-skilled people to fill, or does it have too few talented and high-skilled people to attract the jobs the state needs?
So the question you asked, I've heard you say, Nolan, is a chicken or an egg question, you know, and I would acknowledge that that's the case. What is not a chicken or egg question is what is happening in parts of the country, whether it be states or regions, that have growing population, and it is that their median income for their citizens is higher, and it is directly correlated to the number of citizens as a percentage that have a post-secondary credential. So a post-secondary credential could be a welding certificate, could be an associate degree, or a bachelor's degree is the gold standard. But the higher percentage of that will drive both good jobs and good communities. And we don't have enough of those in Michigan, which is why there's rare political consensus around the idea that we need to increase the number of people in Michigan who have a post-secondary credential. And I will tell you what is clear, that when you do have that, employers will flood to that region. And they will drive up median income, they will drive up safety metrics for society, they'll drive even more employers, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, well, I can't answer the question of what and why business does what it does. What I can say is that we in higher education recognize we have to get more people with post-secondary credentials who want to be in Michigan to learn and then be in Michigan to earn.
Dr. Espy, jobs draw talent or talent draws jobs?
He didn't like my answer, see?
Oh, it's good. I want to give our guest
I will say, so, you know, oftentimes people like to frame things as a this versus that. And when in actuality, it's a both, it's an and, right? So when I think of as the new president of Wayne State University, what I'm worried about is that we're actually leaving talent on the table. That students who are qualified to come to Henry Ford or to Wayne are choosing not to. And yet they're limiting then their potential, perhaps not in job one, but in career, right? Because oftentimes someone will start at a job that may be very well suited for a certificate, but yet they may not want to be in that job when they finish their career. So how do we make sure that they're prepared for that entire career, not just the beginning? So for example, at Wayne, we've worked really hard to collaborate intentionally with Henry Ford. We're a different kind of public research university. We recognize that there are multiple pathways to that outcome. So for example, this year we welcomed almost our very largest class of 3,000 new incoming students. But we also welcomed 1,500 transfer students, many whom come from Henry Ford and our other colleagues across the Detroit metro area. That's really important. Many of them are traditional aged, but not all of them are, right? That they're coming back to upskill or to reskill because they're looking for that next opportunity. And we need to be providing those pathways. When, you know, I am new to Michigan, and when I told my mom, for example, I was coming here, my mom's obviously a generation older than me, she was quite surprised. And yet when I told my assistant in Texas, she's about 30 years old, she's like, Detroit is awesome. It's a place where a lot of things are happening. It's a vibrant environment where you can live, you can work. Those are the stories we need to be getting out, because folks like my assistant, she wants to come just for this job, but she also wants to come for, because there are other opportunities in the future, right? That if this job doesn't work out, she can go work somewhere else. And so I do think there's opportunities through us collaborating and making sure multiple pathways for people to pursue their dreams are available. We're a university of opportunity. We've always been that. We're based in Detroit. We're for Detroit. We're with Detroit. We're in Detroit. And the metro, of course. Those are all one in my mind. I know everyone parses those to different things. But that's the kind of attitude where we all link arms together and make a difference across the education sector and with our industry partners, large and small. Nonprofits are employers too. So is the government. How do we work together to make that happen?
So 20 years ago, Mary Sue Coleman, who was then president of the University of Michigan, came into our offices and just declared that Michigan doesn't have a culture of education. And we were all taken back by that and didn't really believe it because, we got great universities here and we're not a backwater. But she said there's not a culture here that values education, particularly higher education. And so we went out and did a survey. We teamed with the Michigan Education Association and came back, and that poll found that 27% of the parents in Michigan didn't believe a college education was essential to their child's success. Lou Glazier, again, in his poll, asked the same question. And after 20 years, 2 decades of people in the state touting higher education, touting the necessity for skills and the connection between education and prosperity, 25% of parents came back and said, only 25% came back and said a college education is essential to our child. How does a state overcome that, and how does a state build that culture of education?
Madam President?
Okay. So one thing I would say, again, is that when you think about the skills necessary for life, right, there are certainly opportunities and examples of folks who have done incredibly well without a college degree. That doesn't negate the impact that higher education has, not only on earnings potential, but also on other key important outcomes. We forget that college education is related to higher civic participation, to voting, to better family outcomes, better health and well-being, right? So it contributes to the broader social good. And that's part of the reason that there's public investment around higher education. I would agree with you that some of the narrative that has been called into question lately undercuts some of that impact. And certainly individual stories in some ways don't in any way, as a systemic investment, don't in any way undercut that. And I think sometimes we need to entertain and hold those two things in our mind. Yes, individuals can be successful without a college education, but yes, we need to be investing and making those pathways more deliberate, more predictable, and easier for students to navigate. Because for us, for example, half of our students are Pell eligible. They come from under-resourced families. 40% come from transfer. And you know what? When there's any little thing that's not clear or predictable, when they're not sure they can start at Henry Ford and finish at Wayne, they think college isn't for me. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We have a very innovative agreement between us and Henry Ford that we say, okay, you get your 60 credits, you come to Wayne, no questions asked. You graduate with a good GPA, you're coming to Wayne. It's that kind of predictability that allows individuals to take that first step, then take that second step, and enables a whole different kind of future and opportunity.
How big an issue in terms of attainability and accessibility is the cost of a college education, and what are you all doing about it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the previous question was, why is it that less people today than when President Coleman came to you and brought her question to you? Why is it less people today think that the investment in oneself through college is necessary or worth it? And this is a misconception. The price of going to college, particularly the 28 publicly funded community colleges in Michigan, is utterly acceptable. We have almost entirely eliminated the cost barrier, at least for tuition and fees, through all kinds of government action, which I know you've reported on, but some of it's free tuition for those 25 and older, and now has moved down to 21. Last year, the legislature passed an extraordinary influx of money to everyone who is at least in the middle income bracket or below as a Michigan Achievement Scholarship. So the cost of attending college is low, and we have to do a better job of explaining that to folks like you who might say, look, can you have a full-time job and still go to community college or even a university? And the answer is yes. The majority of my students at this institution do that. But you're right, we don't yet have a really compelling story to say why you should get a college certificate or degree and stay in Michigan. And the data bear that out. We have more people coming into Michigan to get a 4-year degree or a higher education certificate than those going out. We migrate in, but when they graduate, we migrate out. And it's a big delta. It's over 5,000 people who graduate with a 4-year degree that leave versus that come in. And here's one of the things that we have to do in higher education that the Chief Growth Officer, which I call CGO Doe, Growth Officer Doe, and that the President just mentioned. We have to build a better pathway. And the work group that some of us are working on under the Grow Michigan Talent Council have decided we're going to recommend that a talent pathway ends with a job. And so the students that President Espy just mentioned that kind of struggle with how does higher ed get to a better place, Nolan, to get 24 or 5% of parents saying it's worth it, to get us to 30 and 40, and like my parents just said, you have to go to college, it's a better way, is to have employers say to those students, if you go to a Henry Ford College, you won't have to ask for permission to transfer to Wayne because they'll accept you with a grade point average that's sufficient. You won't have to wonder whether you'll lose the credits that you paid a lower price for at Henry Ford College. You'll get absolute support from a new president at Wayne State University to get to a bachelor's degree. And then, by the way, we have this panoply of employers who will guarantee you a job. That is what institutions and regions do to pull students through. We're not there yet, but when we do get there, my belief is that number that you've pulled now twice will start to grow, because that's what we've seen in Michigan in the past. When families saw a guarantee or close to a guarantee outcome in anything, whether it be the factory floor or a community college, they'll respond. And we have to do improvement in higher ed at that point right now.
So you mentioned employers. How well connected are you with the employment needs of this region and this state? How much time do you spend talking to the business about their needs and what you could do to better train people for the folks they'll be hiring or jobs they'll be hiring to fill?
From my perspective, this is an area of opportunity for us. And part of the reason I came to Wayne State was to be able to tighten the transition from classroom to career, right? Because it's critically important to have those conversations. We at Wayne, for example, have many advisory committees for our individual schools and colleges that bring that outside voices in. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of unrealized opportunity of listening a little bit more, having direct conversations about what are the skills that are needed, not just for the first job, but over a career, so that we can be building that directly into the curricula through project-based learning experiences, those learning by doing internships, the summer experiences, whether it's at a governmental institution or industry large and small. There's some opportunity there. I don't think we've been as intentional as we could be. And I don't think industry has been as intentional as it could be of linking directly and having those kind of sector by sector conversations. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to be able to do that in Detroit and our region, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
The truth is, higher education, for the vast majority of people who use this, and it is a service, that use this service, do it as a vehicle to a better life, oftentimes in the case of a better job. And we need to go to employers, and employers need to meet us at the table, and I know many of the employers are willing to do this, and we're going to do it together very soon. Tell us what skills you need in exchange for a clear pathway, i.e. a guarantee of a job for a student who can achieve those skills. And if we do that, we'll do what's been done in other parts of the country, because that's the way they do it. And frankly, other really technical, very effective curricula have done that in the past, like medicine and law. They've been doing this for decades. We need to do it here, and with a university like this, I'm excited that we're going to get it done.
So Russ, Business Leaders of Michigan recently had a report on community colleges in the state. Not very favorable, although it did single out Henry Ford as a top performer. And it's one of the criticisms, perhaps its largest criticism, was the lack of coordination between our community colleges and between our universities. Does Michigan need a university system like some states have? Right now, all of our colleges and universities operate autonomously. Do we need a coordinated system?
Well, I'm not going to answer that question.
Well, you're the host. You've got that prerogative.
But I'll say it's a question for public debate, and I will just say this. There are pluses and minuses. But the pluses and minuses of those two options don't change the reality. And that is that the success rates at community colleges need to go up. I've said that publicly. I've made that a goal for Henry Ford College. We were called out as having done a better job, but we are not the best in Michigan yet. We're gonna be, because we're committed to it. And if we bring up success rates across the state at the 2-year level, by the way, we have over half of the people in higher education who are in higher education, universities, private colleges, and community college. We're half the marketplace. We're going to improve that, and maybe that question will kind of be put on the side, because as you know, it's a difficult political question.
And was Texas a university system state?
Texas does have many university systems. It does indeed. And what I would say is, regardless of what type of organization a particular state chooses for their higher education system, fundamentally, it comes down to leaders being willing to work with each other and engage to make things happen. So to me, that question's relatively irrelevant. It's about us working together towards an outcome.
Watch One Detroit, Thursday at 7:30 p.m.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.